So, social psychology is incredibly powerful. It's used by many types of psychology and companies and political parties and a lot of groups that want to understand people for better or to use people for worse, maybe. And we're going to look at how this works. And one of the powers of social psychology, if we understand how we see ourselves and others see us and how the brain works, and the theories about this, um, it can be a very powerful tool to help people, persuade people, and it can also be a powerful tool to persuade people maybe to not always the right ways. So you'll find that a lot of actors and thespians and artists, they understand a lot of psychology. A lot of strong people that work, or a lot of strong teachers and police officers and firefighters, people and nurses and doctors, people that work with people all the time, they usually are pretty strong in social psychology as well. And also, it's very empowering to understand this. You understand how your brain works and how you can maybe think through these things. So, how do people in society shape us? Social psychology. Well, the first idea I want to talk about is social cognition. Social cognition is the memory and bias to help explain how people think about themselves and others. That's social cognition. So we have memories that change, and we find out in memory that our memories aren't always very accurate, and they're depleting. They're going down quickly, and they're filling in gaps. Remember, our brain is always looking for patterns and trying to explain things that may not be, in fact, explainable. Science has a lot of things that are random and serendipitous, meaning they just kind of happen. We don't know why, or it seems like chance. And however, that is not acceptable to our brain. Our brain has to know the answer. Social cognition really raises the question on whether or not individuality is just a myth. Most psychologists, social scientists, and a lot of scientists do not believe that there is such thing as individuality, that a person is in fact their own creator of choice, and that they navigate and they rule and walk through this world unaffected by others, and that the choices they make are always as simple as you make the best choice for yourself. So we're going to find out in social psychology there's a lot of things pushing on us, a lot of forces pushing and trying to shape us, and we have to accept, react, and interact with these forces. People shape us. We choose maybe within things, but even within the things we choose, is it within our own culture? Are we thinking outside of our world? Can we think outside of our world? Have been some of the questions that have been brought about by psychologists and social scientists and scientists. So, can you even think in terms of different worldviews if you've been brought up in a certain culture, in a certain way of things happening? Now, these bias and these messages we pick up on come from media and materialism and cultural things, and we're going to find out why. What's going on here? So how do we create mental images of ideas and objects? So we create in our mind what are called a schema. A schema is when the brain organizes bits of information into mental representations of the world. So as I show in the picture, when I say the word chair, without looking at the screen, you could picture a chair in your head. You have a schema built in your head of what a chair is. Do all humans have a schema for chair? Probably not. Maybe a hunter-gatherer would have no idea what you're talking about. And there are still hunter-gatherers, but most people would have a schema for what a chair looks like based on their experience and the messages they've received through society. Well, these schemas are also applied to people and groups in our head, whether we like it or not. And they're based on bias, they're based on messages and things that we've been taught, or messages we've been picked up from in our culture and on how things should be. And these can lead to things and prejudgments, our prejudices. Like, I don't like those people. Well, why don't you like those people? I just don't like those people. Well, okay, all right. Well, maybe you had a bad experience with a person, or so you assume all people are bad. Or it could be that, I had a really good experience with somebody. So my favorite teacher had a beard. So I tend to think that men teachers with beards tend to be funnier or funner to be around, more fun around to be around. And then women teachers are mean. I've had students tell me that men teachers are sillier or they're funnier. So they built the schema and they had a bias and they prejudged me as a male teacher and they had prejudgments about female teachers. They built this view of what a male teacher looks like is maybe happy, which leads to the next thing, which is called idea, which is heuristics. And this is very important. How do we make decisions? Well, under heuristics, our brain is processing immense amounts of information, okay? You're looking at constant stimulation through your sensory memory. So you have hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, all the senses are going haywire all the time. Your brain can only accept so much into the short-term memory onto the long-term memory. So you have these schemas, and that leads to heuristics is where your brain has to make these rule of thumb that they can apply guided decision making based on more limited subsets of available information, which means based on the information they have, they quickly make snap judgments. I told the story of the guy that had the part of his brain basically destroyed, where his heuristics were off. He was very analytical and critical in thinking. He had a lot of analysis. Well, heuristics make sense. You don't want to spend all day long making complex decisions and analyzing every little thing you do in your life. That's not efficient. That's actually illogical. So, for example, whether or not I should eat Raisin Bran or Chex Mix in the morning, you might be able to think about it for a second or not. Oh, I like Chex Mix. Let's go. But if you're spending an hour and a half having a debate in your mind about whether or not Chex Mix has how many calories, well, what about the sugar content? And this keeps going on and on and on. This is going to lead to inefficiencies where you're not going to get to school on time. And it's going to cause other problems. So the way the brain works is it has to make these snap judgments, these really quick decisions based on the limited amount of information we have. Well, that information is based on those schemas we have. And those schemas a lot of times are created by society. They're created by advertisement, media, our friends, our family, and the messages we pick up, whether they're accurate or not. And that's what leads to bias and prejudgments about people and things and cultures and ideas and places. And one of the best ways to break through your heuristics is to actually experience things. So if you ever have prejudgments about Canadians, go to Canada. And that really breaks down those walls. If you've never met, if you have prejudgments about Jewish Americans, go meet a Jewish American and talk to them. And that will break down those heuristics a lot of times. Because they rely on less information, heuristics are assumed, so they're assumptions to facilitate faster decision making and strategize that require more information. So you got to go. Your heuristics are boom, 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 boom. You've all heard that you have a very short period of time to decide whether you like somebody or not, and that really is how the brain works. So you're going to kind of jump in and you got to move on to the next person and the next thing to do in the day. Now, understanding this, there's some other effects that we learned about, how we form our attitudes and how we kind of create these heuristics and we come to assumptions. And one effect is called the mere exposure effect. And advertisers and consumer psychologists use this stuff to create better products. And that's a very lucrative. A lot of money to be made in consumer psychologists because they help design everything from your smartphones and your computers and everything. So the mere exposure effect states that more one is exposed to something, the more they're willing to like it. All right. So whether or not you have strong feelings about Donald Trump, man, when he was president, bad or good, he was getting lots and lots of media attention. Well, If you believe in the mere exposure effect, you're going to tend to be more likely to like him the more you see him or you're exposed to him. But in our general life, it works more like advertisers apply this theory using product placement, bombarding people with ads. So logos, for example, how powerful are logos? You guys could probably recognize the logo of a Coca-Cola when I could just give you the O of the Coke and you could recognize it. But could you recognize things that really affect your life every day? Like an oak tree. Would you know what an oak tree looks like outside? Well, we have oak trees all over St. Louis. But the advertisers know this. They know that if they keep exposing you to the symbols and ideas and the commercials and a person, you're going to start to like them. Even like a person in general. You might have quick judgments about a teacher you meet in the hall. Oh, I don't like that guy. Why don't you? Yeah. Well, if you take his course, you're more likely to like him because you're going to get more and more exposed to him. The next idea is central root. So central root is trying to get the customer to deeply process the content of the message. What about Nike is so much better than others? They're going to send you these messages. And through central rooting, they're going to keep trying to convince you that Nikes are the greatest shoe ever made. You can't go outside without a pair of Air Jordans. They're the best shoes ever. Everybody knows it. They're the coolest, and everybody wears them. That's bandwagon effect. And by constantly exposing LeBron James wearing his Nikes or Michael Jordan wearing his Air Jordans, I got to get a pair of these. You're more likely to like it. And the message is that they are the best. They really are the best shoes if you think about it through central rooting because, LeBron James wears a Michael Jordan. What's a better basketball shoe than the best basketball players playing it? So obviously it's true. And you really think and you give it this credibility. Now, the peripheral root involves the aspect of the message involving the characteristics of a person imparting the message, the communicator. So LeBron James is an awesome communicator. Drake, if you like music, is a good salesman. Kim Kardashian, she sells products. We all know who Kim Kardashian. Donald Trump, well, hate him or like him, he moves a lot of products in his name. He was a celebrity before anything, and he was actually these effects would explain why he would win an election. You think we have a man that had no political experience, yet he became president of the United States. A lot of people voted for him. Well, most of this is probably they knew him as an idea and a consumer product. He had no experience on helping people on the political level. He had never been in politics. But they hired him and voted for him based on he was on a TV show where he fired people, The Apprentice. And we all know these people and these products really stand out in our minds. And name brands are so powerful, and we know it. Some research suggests that the more educated people are, the less likely they're being persuaded by advertisements. So we do know that if you hear these messages, you might get tired of this. You might not buy this anymore. You might start believing, you know what, there's really not that big of a difference between name brand soda and the cheap stuff. I could drink Schnucks, Cokes, and they taste about the same as a Coca-Cola. Somebody that's not as educated, they might be like, I want a Coca-Cola or Pepsi. That's the only thing I'll drink. I'm not drinking that cheap junk. It's not the same thing. You could show people that off-brands are almost the exact same, if not the exact same product. They were still product loyal because of the effects of consumer psychology that they will, in fact, not buy off-brand stuff. They think that somehow it's being cheap or the product is inferior, even if the stuff is made on the same line. And it affects quite a few people. But the more educated you are, you'll be like, you know what? It's all the same stuff. Shoes are shoes. I just need hiking boots to go hiking in the woods. I don't care what brand they are. I don't need Nike basketball shoes. If they're nice shoes, I'm going to wear them to play basketball. Research has found that when dealing with relatively uninformed audience, presenting a one-sided message is best. You've got to You got to say this is the best product. You got to push one big idea. You don't want to have both sides, or you don't want to be honest about all angles on something. You just want to hit them with one message. And we can see this in politics. Politicians will argue one position and they won't even talk about the possible negative consequences of their idea. They're going to present a one-sided issue, and people that are uninformed, they'll either like it. They might like what they're saying. When attempting to influence a more sophisticated audience, however, a communication acknowledges and refutes opposing arguments will be more effective. So if you have more educated or you have people that tend to be more critical thinkers, they're going to be like, I don't know if I trust this. What are the problems, or what's the plus or minuses with this? And then finally, some research suggests that the messages that arouse fear are effective. However, too much fear can actually cause a negative reaction to the message itself. So if you look especially at political commercials, you'll see that, like, we've got to fight terrorism. These are the enemy, counterculture, or cancel culture. There's always these negative things you have to fight. Well, if it's too much negativity, that might turn people off. They're like, I'm not voting for that guy. Everything's about fighting and war, and it doesn't sound like he even has a vision for the country. So you want to scare people into buying the product, but if you go overboard, you could actually have a negative impact. These are just some of the tools you learn that impact, and they actually swayed people.